Hello and welcome everyone to another Tea with Mel series. Today I want to share my story with you. But before we get started, I found this random tea in my cupboard and I have no idea what it was. And I tried to look it up in my fabulous book, but it's not in there. So then I had to Google it, which I typically don't do with herbs because you don't get a lot of information from Google in terms of teas. But it's apparently it's a black, green, oolong, or white tea. So it is going to have some caffeine aspects to it. But it did show that it had immune boosting abilities. It helped with weight loss. And so it had some good stuff in there. I particularly liked that it has, let's just find the bit, so it has anti-cancer effects. So so that was quite cool. And the immune system. So it says the EGCG, which it contains, restores the immunological balance in multiple autoimmune diseases, in decreasing the production of many inflammatory markers, which, if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that endometriosis is ultimately an inflammatory condition, or there's an overreaction essentially by those inflammatory markers. So that was kind of cool to read about that. So if you want to know the tea, it is Camellia sinensis is the proper name of it. Don't know if you guys can see that at all. That's but I can pop that in the chat for you guys if you wish. So I'll just type that in there. So yeah, how are you guys? How is everything? How are you trucking along? Let me know where you are, how you're finding things. Would love to hear back from you. Let me know where you're at within your journey. And obviously then I can also cater sort of my sharing today. My journey with you today is really to give you hope, to give you a sense that there is a way forward. There is a way to really address endometriosis naturally. And it's just about understanding this condition a little bit more, understanding exactly what is going on, and then supporting the body. So it's not that diet is a cure. It's not like you eat certain things and then that's what actually cures. It's actually that you're providing an environment for healing. And that's quite a big distinction, because I think we have this sort of very medical view of things, of take something equals a result. And that's not really a holistic way of looking at the body. So the holistic way is really, let's provide the body with all the tools that it needs. So, a healthy, nutritious diet, a nice, safe environment where you're not stressed out, you're moving your body adequately, you've gotten rid of any parasites or toxins in the body, and then the body has the opportunity to heal. I just want to say that that environment that your body is in is ultimately what needs support. And that varies from person to person, because some people literally just change their diet and they feel much better, because often within the diet you are supporting a lot of those other things. So when we eat well, we will be able to lower stress, because if you think about it, if the body is depleted, it will be kind of tired, and things will be harder because you don't have what you need, and so your stress levels are naturally going to go up just by that fact. So if you're not sort of nourishing the body adequately, so it's almost like you're running on really low fuel all the time, and so things become more overwhelming because you don't have the energy source to actually do them. So then obviously stress levels go up. So that's the whole picture essentially of our environment. Okay, so yes, welcome everyone. Feel free to introduce yourself. I'm going to have some of this tea, which I have no idea what it's going to taste like. If you missed it, I found this random tea bag in my cupboard. I'm starting to run out of teas actually for you guys, so I'm going to have to do a little tea shop and see what I can find. But this was in my cupboard, Camellia sinensis, and it has got fabulous immune qualities. So it actually lowers the inflammatory markers that are associated with autoimmune conditions, which, as some of you may know by now, endometriosis is essentially an overreaction, an inflammatory condition. So by focusing on that, we can alleviate some of those symptoms with endometriosis. All right, so let's get started. So my story, where do I begin? Okay, so I first got my period when I was probably around 12, and I remember it being quite a traumatic experience because I had no idea what to expect, and my mother just kind of gave me a tampon and said, just use this, and insert it in there. She didn't really give me much of an explanation. And so I didn't know how deep the tampon actually needs to go. And she said, periods are painful. Like, she just pretty much told me from the get-go, your period can be painful. And so I wasn't sure what painful meant. And so I put the tampon in, but not all the way. So you can imagine that would have been quite painful, particularly, if it's sitting at the front portion of the vaginal vagina. You've got, there's quite a sensitive area. And so, I walked around like that for a while, and she sort of said, you look very uncomfortable. Maybe you didn't quite put it in right. And so that was my first experience, which was not pleasant at all, highly embarrassing. And I do think there is a lot of kind of emotions and feelings around our period that often is kind of the bigger picture in terms of how we then look at our periods going forward and how we feel as being a woman, and a lot of those sort of mindset things that come with having a period. I mean, why is it shameful to have a period? Why, when you see ads on TV for pads or tampons, they never use blood-colored stuff. It's always blue or something else. I mean, it's blood. It's what comes out of the body, So why is it made to be something bad, something shameful? So, so I guess that was my first experience. And then I had, sort of consistently had my periods, but, they were reasonably painful, but not dramatically painful. And then when I was about 16, I remember going to a school dance or some sort of event, and I had to dress up. And when I was quite skinny, so I would wear quite tight fitting clothing. And I remember it was the day after my period, and people sort of coming up to my mother asking if there was something wrong with my stomach, because my stomach was so swollen after my period. And, they sort of questioning what was going on. And I just explained that I just had my period. But that was pretty much where the conversation ended, because nobody really knew what endometriosis was. There was no sort of link to that potentially being a factor. And so as I, went through my teenage years, the period pain did get worse and the swelling did get worse. And, I'm sure you guys have similar stories yourselves. And then I just thought this was normal, as I'm sure many of you do, have that experience where you grow up with period pains. Mum had period pain, grandmum had period pain. It was just what you put up with as a woman, or so we were told. And so we dismissed it like it was just normal, took painkillers, carried on, and so that was pretty much what I did. It was only when I went on holiday, and we were way up north. So I was living in South Africa at the time. We were living way up north, and we're staying at like in the Kruger Park or something. So it's a good, good drive to get home. And I remember just having intense pain, like really intense pain, thinking that there was a lot going on. Maybe I had a bladder infection, something like that. And the drive home being absolute agony, like literally just keeled over in such agony, sort of yelling at my dad just to slow down and just being really almost traumatized by that experience. Um, and sort of went to the gynae after that and said, look, I've got this pain. And they did say, yes, it's a bladder infection. And once again, it was kind of dismissed as that was that. But the pain didn't go away. So the pain, yes, I felt some relief after taking the antibiotics for the bladder infection, but then the pain didn't go away. And so I remember distinctly lying in the bath and looking down at my belly and just kind of being like, what is this pain? Like, because I was, trying to soothe myself and just really tuning in with my body and saying, what is this pain? What's going on here? And sort of this inner knowing just saying, you've got to go see a gynecologist. This is something to do with your female, your female bits, as I like to call them. And just kind of having this inner knowing that that's what was going on was somewhat reassuring, I guess. So yeah, so that was, I guess, my first kind of inkling that there was something else going on. It wasn't just a bladder infection. It wasn't normal, So I don't know if you guys can relate at all, if you want to share your experience, if you had a similar experience, or if your pain was more intense in the beginning. Like my pain it wasn't that intense. Like the period pain wasn't that intense. It was roughly, I could take a couple of painkillers and then I could get through, the first couple of days. So feel free to comment or share at any point. I love getting comments. So yeah, if you guys have been following these for a while, you probably know that. That's the tea, by the way, if you guys missed that. Okay, so then I decided to go and see a specialist gynecologist because I had this inkling that that's what was going on for me. And so I told him all my symptoms. I expressed all the things that were going on. And I remember him distinctly saying, I suspect this is endometriosis. And I'd never heard of endometriosis before. I had no reference at all to this condition. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what he was talking about. When he explained it to me, I was like, what? I have no idea what you're saying. Because I wasn't familiar, obviously, with any of my womanly bits. I mean, most of us are not. And I remember just partly feeling relief because, yay, I knew what was going on and there was something that I could pinpoint this to. But then the recommendations after that weren't anything that I was particularly wanting to do, because his first recommendation was, well, we need to have surgery to see what was going on. And then, from there, we can look at a treatment option. Now, I don't know how you were when you had your experience, but for me, I really believed that I would have this one surgery and then that would be the end. Like, I really believed that they would cut it out and all will be well after that. I don't know why I thought that, but that was kind of my hope, is that they would cut it out and then it would be the end of the story. And so the treatment options would then correct anything, so that was kind of my thinking. And perhaps you guys have had similar sort of experiences. But So I had the first surgery and it was so tough. It was so tough. I remember just really struggling with the surgery and just the healing time was really long. I didn't react well to the anesthetic. I didn't, I couldn't come out of it very well. I was so drowsy, like I was so out of it. I don't know if it was the combination of things they gave me to calm me down or what it was, but I just felt terrible. Like I couldn't walk out of the center that I had the treatment done, and so they had to wheel me out. I don't remember how I got home. Like it was just this blur of things happening. And then the recovery itself was really long as well. I do remember having a reaction to the antibiotics. So then they had to change the antibiotics because I was literally on the toilet in agony, like, having diarrhea and just this really bad reaction to the antibiotics. And everything hurts. As I'm sure you know, it's like everything just hurts. And so going to the toilet hurts. But then if you get diarrhea, it's like worse. So I remember just feeling really terrible and taking, I think it was something like 4 weeks to actually recover. And the gynecologist essentially confirmed that I had endometriosis and it was stage 4. It was everywhere. It was in the pouch of Douglas. It was all on the left side, all on the right side. It was just a mess in there. And my thinking was, as I said, that would be the end of it, that they went in there, cleaned it all up, and now we're good to go. And so I said, okay, well, what's kind of the treatments from here? And just, I don't know why, but I just had this weird feeling that he wasn't really the right surgeon for me. So I wanted to get like a specialist who specialized in endometriosis specifically. And so went and found a specialist specifically for endometriosis. And his recommendation was to get a treatment called Synarel. It's probably a brand name, that essentially you spray up your nose and it stops the pituitary gland from doing anything. So you're not having your period, you're not even ovulating, nothing's happening. And I remember actually just loving that treatment. I remember feeling so happy that I'd found him because he'd recommended this to me. I had no pain whatsoever during that time. I remember just feeling that everything was good, the treatment was working, everything was fine. And then it came to about 6 months, and he basically called me into his office and he said, right, well, we now have to look at some other treatment options for you. And I kind of was very confused. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, no, you can't keep staying on the Synarel because, it's only a short-term treatment. And I was like, but why? It works so well. I mean, you've got to remember, I was like in my early 20s at this point. So I was really naive about most things. I just literally trusted myself to whatever surgeon, whatever doctor. A lot of you lovely women who follow this, you're much stronger than I was. I mean, you stand up to your doctors and you question things. I never did that. I literally went along with whatever they said. You guys know what you're doing. I'm just going to trust you. That was very much my approach. And so he basically told me that the Synarel affects bone health, and that if I continue to take it, that it may affect my bone health in later years. And that was the first I'd ever heard of this because, of course, I didn't read any of the little leaflets that came with the treatment. I didn't really give it that much thought, perhaps, because I was in my 20s. It didn't really feature as a factor in my life. But it was a bit of a shock. And it was a bit of a, what do you mean, my bone health? Like, how can a treatment affect your bone health? Like, I was really that naive. I did not consider side effects in a treatment. I did not think about that. all I wanted to do was address the endometriosis. And my thinking was, well, if I address the endometriosis, which is my main problem, then I'm good to go. Like, that was really my thinking. And so it was very difficult to kind of consider that there would be, in my view at the time, there would be a sacrifice. And that sacrifice was, well, okay, this may affect my bone health. This may affect, other aspects of my body. Am I prepared to sacrifice those things for the treatment of my endometriosis? And because the endometriosis was so intense, I was like, yes, let's do whatever it takes. I don't care if I have to deal with bone problems down the track, because I was in my 20s. It wasn't really a factor at that point. I mean, as you get older, you start to kind of really notice these things more because you are more mindful of your health as you get older. So, yeah, so that was pretty scary for me. What was your first treatment? Do you want to share what was your first treatment? What was recommended to you? If wherever you are in your journey, if you've just had surgery, what have they recommended to you? Like, feel free to share. I'm just going to have some tea. I'm not sure if I like this tea that much. Might need a little bit of honey. Nobody feels like sharing. Okay. Well, so yeah, so from there, I literally went down this medical route, and I did that for 15 years and pretty much did whatever they told me to do. So initially it was the Cynaral, then it was Danazol, which I took that, and then I said I wanted to go to Australia traveling with my friend. And so I took the Danazol throughout that whole time, but it didn't work at all. Like, I was spotting pretty much the whole time I was away, which was around 8 months. So I was just, and once again, I didn't even think anything of this. I was just like, oh, well, what do you do? I was young. I just wanted to travel. I didn't really think about it that much. And so when I came back, because obviously I came back and I said, well, I tried this treatment and it didn't really work. They said, oh, well, you're going to have another surgery then. So, I kind of felt an aspect of, I didn't take responsibility in actually letting them know that the treatment hadn't worked for me. And so I had another surgery. And then we tried, I can't even remember all the different treatments, but I literally tried a various selection of different treatments for any length of time, and most of them didn't work for me. Most of them, I had either spotting or really bad side effects, or just didn't feel very well. I did gain a lot of weight over that time as well because of the side effects. I, was very my stomach was always like, I had really sensitive issues with my stomach. And I had this really annoying eye thing. So this was when I was on the pill. So basically they put me on the pill continuously. So I didn't have a breakthrough bleed at all. So I just took the pill continuously. And I had this eye thing where my eyes would get really gritty and sore, like to the point where I couldn't, like, I had to close my eyes. It was so painful. And I remember going to see an eye specialist and them saying, it looks like you have glass shards in your eyes. That's how bad it looks. And essentially it was only years later, like once I'd kind of gone down this natural route, that I figured out that the pill dries up mucous membranes in the body. And so, being the eyes, that's a mucus area of the body. And so that's why that area then becomes really dry and painful, because it's not meant to be dried up. So, so that was what was going on there. So, yeah, but I had a lot of side effects from the pill, mostly digestive issues and weight gain, really bad skin, like moodiness. But here's the thing, I still had pain. So that was the weird thing. Like, I felt like I had no choice. I felt like well, I've gone to the specialists. They've told me I need to take these things. I've tried all of these different treatments. I've been, you know, following the best advice that I could find in terms of those treatments, and yet I was still having pain. I was still having pain during sex. That was the biggest clue. Like, the pain was really intense. I remember I was seeing this guy at the time. This was in London, and him actually knowing how deep he could go in terms of penetration, because at certain points, I would literally close up because it was so painful. And he knew, he could tell, you know. So it wasn't really treating anything. It was just suppressing a lot of those symptoms. So, but yes, I pretty much went on this merry-go-round of surgeries. So I literally had a surgery every year and a half, and that's what they told me I needed to do. I needed to clean everything out so that the treatments could only be so effective. This was what I was told. The treatments were only that effective, and we need to just go in and clean everything out every year and a half. And I wanted to be a good little girl, and so I followed all of that advice. And I didn't consider any of the side effects. I didn't consider what the pill was doing to me. I didn't consider what the surgeries were doing to me. All I wanted was that endometriosis to be controlled as best I could. And I thought that I was doing that at the time. I really thought I was doing the best that I could at the time. And it was only when I got to Australia, this was years and years later, that I immigrated to Australia, and I couldn't actually have another surgery because when you first immigrate and you have to get, some kind of health insurance, if it's a pre-existing condition, they generally won't cover it. And so I felt really stuck in terms of that, because I had this idea still that I needed to have surgery every year and a half, and that was kind of my routine. Also, the last surgeries that I had, I felt terrible. Like, I felt really terrible. And, my body was just saying, I don't want to do any more of this. This is just hard on me. And I remember it being really sad because it becomes so routine that nobody had come to this after, when you wake up, normally your friends and your family are there for you. Well, nobody was there when I woke up, and I remember just this huge depression. And a lot of that is the anesthetics. So, they have shown that can affect you. But I remember just feeling really, really depressed and really stuck in terms of everything, because I felt like I'd given this everything. I felt like I'd tried so hard and done the best that I felt I could do for my treatment, for myself. And yet I was still having pain. I was still having to have these surgeries. I was having all these side effects, and I didn't really feel like myself. It was sort of weird, but the specialist at the time sort of recommended that I avoid high stress environments. And a lot of the sort of aspirations I had were high stress. I wanted to own my own coffee shop at the time. I wanted to, have a business, all these things. And I knew those were high stress. And so I just avoided doing those. I took really easy jobs. I took jobs where I could go home early. I chose boyfriends who understood when it was sore. I had friends. I chose my friends based on whether they would understand. And I mean, not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I kind of molded my whole life around endometriosis. Like, it formed so much of who I became because I let that dominate, and everything else was secondary. Everything was about the endometriosis, even my health. Like, I was like, I don't care if I have to go on treatments, and I'm not even going to read the flyers. I'm not going to take consideration as to how it may affect me later in life. I didn't think about it. I really didn't, consider these things as even a problem. And so I guess this is kind of hindsight, But that's probably why I do what I do, is I don't want you to experience the same thing. I don't want you to go through that merry-go-round and that journey, because I feel like I'm still cleaning up so much of the imbalances that came about because of that experience. So much of the things that you create in those decisions. I mean, every single surgery you have, you're creating adhesions. Every single time you take a synthetic treatment, that is affecting your hormone balance and your liver health. Every time, like the pill affects the digestive natural balance. And so you take that for years. I literally took that, I don't remember, I think it was 7 or 9 years or something like that. And yes, I had digestive issues, but I just went, oh, well, that's just another thing to add to my list. I didn't recognize that that was part of the picture, because you're altering the microbiome in that process. So the microbiome is all the good guys, or the essentially the bacteria that live in the gut. And when we take synthetic hormones, the pill, it doesn't matter what it is, any kind of synthetic treatment, you are altering those. You're altering your liver health, you're altering your hormone health. And all of those have got consequences. I mean, there's a reason that these things come with flyers because we're meant to read them to check that we don't have any risk of any of those things, which of course I didn't do, and I didn't recognize, and I possibly didn't care. I just wanted the pain to go away, and I just wanted to live a normal life. Um, it got so bad I remember having my period one day, actually here in New Zealand, or was it in Australia? No, I think it was. No, sorry, it was in Australia. I sometimes get my countries confused. I was in Australia and I was working this temp job, so it wasn't like a particularly stressful job. And I remember getting my period, and the period pain being so intense that I didn't know how I was going to get home. By the stage, I was still on the pill. And I remember the pain taking over my whole body and having to literally pull over and throw up. Like, I literally had to get out of the car, run into the bushes, and throw up because the pain was so intense. That's how bad it was. And it got to the point where the pain was like all the time, like every single day. It wasn't just, at that sort of certain time of the month. It was every single day I was experiencing pain. And I didn't know when it would come, what triggered it. I didn't connect things. I didn't recognize that certain foods made it worse. I didn't recognize that drinking alcohol made it worse. To me, it was like, well, this is relief from the pain. But of course, then you're dealing with it the next day. You might have relief on the day, but then the next day you're feeling worse for it. And so, yeah, so I think I carried on like that for quite a while because I didn't believe that I had any other choice. And I remember it was at a point where I was taking painkillers every day. Like, I was living on painkillers, and there's a blog post about my what I call my addiction to painkillers. And my partner, who's now my husband, said to me, "This is not normal. You should not be taking this many painkillers every single day." I mean, it got to the point where, because this is when we were living in a rainforest in Australia, way up north in the Daintree, if anyone's from Australia. And it was not easy to find painkillers there because, you had to drive 2 hours to get to Cairns. You had to drive an hour to get to Mossman. Like, everything was quite a distance away. And there wasn't a lot of pharmacies, so it got to the point where I literally had to drive to different pharmacies because I didn't want them to recognize me buying these 48 packs of painkillers. That's how bad it was. Like, it was to the point where I was hiding I believe it was an addiction to painkillers, but, I was literally taking them like every single day. And It was bad, you know. My digestive system was completely messed up. I, constantly had diarrhea and just so many issues, headaches all the time. I was tired a lot. It didn't feel well at all. And that was kind of the first thing my husband my husband, now my husband, but at the time he wasn't my husband, but he sort of saying, "Oh, this is very weird that you're needing to take this many painkillers." And that was kind of the first inkling. And then I constantly had the diarrhea, so I kind of Googled that, and that was the first step. That was my very first step. And that was, like, when I look back, that was the very first thing that I changed, is I got off dairy. Because I read on the internet that diarrhea, having continuous diarrhea can be triggered by a lactose intolerance, and so I eliminated dairy. And I did actually feel quite a lot better. I didn't have such severe diarrhea. I was still on the pill at this point. And I didn't have, quite as many of those sort of digestive issues which were going on prior. Prior to that, you've got to remember this was, I was living on cereal for breakfast, so I was having milk in that. I was having cheese for lunch, so we were having toasties every single lunchtime. We were having toasties, so I was having that every single day. And then inevitably I would have some ice cream or something for dinner with cream in it, So I was having a lot of dairy. And so by eliminating it completely, I felt quite a significant shift. So for you guys who don't know this, dairy is a big contributor to inflammatory responses in the body, and particularly around hormone balance. It's actually very interesting. There's a correlation with hormone imbalances and dairy, particularly the A1 dairy, which some people are okay with other forms of dairy, other forms like goat's milk or whatever. I still cannot touch most of those. It's obviously the lactose, which my body doesn't like, but rather than the casein. I'm okay with butter, but most other dairy just doesn't work for me. So I can tolerate it now if I have it in small amounts, but certainly not something I could incorporate as a permanent thing in my diet. So anyway, now this was the first step. So, the first step towards opening myself up to this potential of a natural approach. And then I started the blog, actually. It was around about 2010 that I started the blog. And the blog, first name, or for you, some of you may have been following me that long, was called Cure Endometriosis, because that was my goal. I since changed the name because people were assuming that I was saying that you could cure endometriosis with my techniques, and I didn't want to get into the political debates about things. So I changed the name, but my mission was ultimately to cure myself of endometriosis. And so the blog essentially was dedicated to this mission of finding things that could help me. And you can go back in the archives if you want to read my whole journey, but I literally experimented with everything and anything I could find. I went through big shifts with my diet. A big part of what I believed at the time was that your diet is where you really make the changes. At the time, I was really influenced by David Wolfe, who's now gone a little bit too extreme for me. Like, he's a bit weird now, but at the time he was really influential in terms of talking a lot about how diet can influence your health. And it was all new to me. I was like, wow, this is all new. And he was very motivational in terms of the shifts that you can feel in your body in terms of your health and how diet can influence that. And so he was a little bit of a mentor for me in terms of that. Like, I was able to actually open up to this potential that diet could make a difference. Prior to that, I never believed that diet could make any difference because doctors had never, they always said, no, it makes no difference. And so I'd eaten pretty rubbish before then. And so I went on this whole exploration, and it was very much a exploration of an adventure of discovering, okay, what can I eat? How do these foods influence things? And it was a very, very long journey. So for some of you, if you've made some of those key significant changes, well done, because it took me a very long time to make those changes. I mean, it was dairy first, then sugar, then gluten, but that took something like 3 years or something to make those changes because I was so comfortable with my first way of eating, which was pretty much the Western diet. I ate whatever, didn't really think about it. And the thing with the diet changes, I think there's two things going on there. The first is that obviously by shifting away from dairy, gluten, sugar, you're almost forced to eat better because a lot of the highly produced foods contain those things, So, the cereals, they naturally contain gluten, they naturally contain sugar. So you're kind of almost forced to choose something else that doesn't have those things. And they tend to be more natural, more healthy options. It's sort of, kind of like a better option based on lack of choice. So I initially shifted, my breakfast was my main thing because I felt that if I shifted my breakfast, it almost set me up for the rest of the day. So if I started my day with a bowl of Cocoa Pops, I found that generally the rest of the day was kind of a write-off. I would carry on eating badly for the rest of the day. But if I started the day with something nourishing and healthy, then I would continue. And so the diet became a big focus, and I ate incredibly healthy. I was super strict. So the second point I forgot to mention. The second point is that you've got to think about the mindset behind diet, and there is a huge thing here. So I think that the more we feel we are in control of our diet, the more we can influence how we feel with our diet. There's a part of that which is also a mindset shift in terms of if I eat really super strictly and I eat perfectly, then I get the result of feeling better and not being in pain. But is it the diet or is it the thinking around that that's actually shifting the pain? And that was a big question because when I remember if I occasionally I would have something by accident, like I'd have some gluten by accident or whatever. And it was literally the minute I figured out that there was gluten in food that I would instantly get pain. Now, there's no way the body can react that quickly. So, generally it takes a couple of hours for things to move through. So there was definitely a mind connection with this controlled diet. And if I could just have my diet more controlled, then I would have no pain. I would be in control of my endometriosis. It's dangerous territory, this. And I guess this is what I was alluding to in my email, is that there is an aspect here that where you're opening yourself up to kind of having, like sort of nourishment issues in terms of being so restrictive in your diet. You're also opening yourself up to having eating disorders, where we're so strict, we're so eliminatory, we're so focused on our food, and we put everything else aside. Like it actually becomes a little bit dangerous. And I've seen this happen with women where they go on these super strict diets, like they might go FODMAPs or they might go vegan or they might go something. And it's so strict to the point where they can't socialize, they can't go out, they can't, do anything because the diet has taken over. But there's such a strong belief that the diet is what's going to help me and what's going to heal me, that they want to have that level of control over it. And maybe you're in the same boat. Feel free to share once again if you want to share, because this is really important, and it's actually really dangerous. There are so many of these hyper strict diets out there now. Like, I'm all for eating healthy, but like, you've got to still live. You still got to be able to socialize. You still got to be able to hang out with people and do normal things. And I don't know, there's an aspect of that can get really mentally, from a mental perspective, that can get really unhealthy. Anyway, so I was on this super healthy diet. I reckon I didn't touch gluten for 10 years. I didn't touch dairy. Hardly. I had butter, but that was about it. I didn't touch anything with sugar. So I remember there's even a blog post about my chocolate experience after not having chocolate for years. I was just so strict and so religious, is the right word, religious, about my diet. I really believed it was everything and it could cure everything. But here's the thing. Okay, so I was doing all of that. I was super healthy, doing all the diet, doing all of that, but I was still not 100% well. I was still having pain. So this is where it's like, what? Like, how can that be? Because surely if you're eating this perfect diet, then you should be all good. Well, that's what the question became. And also, just to mention, I was taking a whole lot of supplements as well. You know, I was really into the supplements and all the different herbs and all the things. So I did learn a lot, obviously, during this time. And a lot of those do work. A lot of the dietary recommendations certainly support your body. But there's a big part of this that I guess I need to really stress, is that piece is one piece. There is lots of pieces to really healing the body. And I made that my full focus. So that's why we have the REACH technique, because it's not just about the diet. That's one piece of the puzzle. So, oh, yay, we have a comment. Let me get rid of my comment. And I can share the new comment. Yeah, it's not that you can't do a rigid diet. You know, it's really just being mindful of how far you take it. You know, I think that we become obsessive and control freakish about it. You know, when you're having arguments with people around you about your diet and you're getting worked up about it, that's when you know that there's a potential mental health thing going on. You know, when you have a little bit of something that you shouldn't have, and you get all panicky and you get all anxious about it, that's really what I'm saying. I'm not saying diet doesn't work. I'm not saying, you know, what you eat doesn't matter. It hugely matters. It's massive. But it's just being mindful of how rigid you are with that, you know. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Thanks for commenting. Right, and then we've got another comment. So, Rel, I tried so many versions of the Endo diet, low FODMAPs, no dairy, no sugar, no red meat, etc. But you have to find what works for your symptoms and is sustainable. Definitely. Yeah. So here's, I guess, what I found. Okay. So I'm designing a really cool course for you guys, by the way. I'm so excited about it. It's hopefully coming out by the end of this month. But essentially, what I talk about is that there's this heightened inflammation in the body, okay? And the surest way to get inflammation down is through diet. Now, if you're eating dairy, gluten, red meat, depending on quantities, it comes down to how much of oxidative stress that red meat actually releases. So a lot of that's got to do with where you're getting the source of the meat, but that's a whole nother conversation. And a low FODMAPs actually focuses more on sort of the digestive side of things. But here's the thing, okay? So when we have this heightened inflammation and then we eat a more, a diet focused on reducing inflammation, we are going to feel better because we're reducing inflammation. And that is the key trigger here of what's causing pain and what's triggering a lot of those symptoms with endometriosis. So it does make sense. The danger is that so let's jump to the next bit, really, is that it's all about mindset and beliefs. And a lot of that emotional stuff ties in with diet. Okay. So I guess I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. So I did practice yoga as my next point of call. Yoga was incredibly beneficial for my journey in terms of shifting a lot of that adhesion release. So there's a lot of adhesions that build up with having that many surgeries. And it does help when you practice yoga, particularly opening up exercises. Lots more other treatments need to be done for adhesions, but yoga significantly reduces a lot of the tightness in that space. Yoga also allowed me to lower some of that anxiety, lower some of that stress level. It's very much focused on breath, being present, so hugely beneficial. We do have a yoga program specifically for endometriosis. If anyone is interested, let me know. So replenish is all about diet. E is all about exercise. And A is all about affirm. Affirm has got to do with your mindset, your thinking, your belief in yourself. All of that stuff is got to do with shifting some of the beliefs that you hold. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So my belief on if I eat this perfect diet, then I will feel better is a belief. And a lot of that belief came back to my own self-worth, my own value in the world, and believing that I needed to be perfect to get whatever I wanted out of life, that I was not valuable enough on my own. I needed to prove myself in some way. I needed hardship. I needed sacrifice. So a lot of the time, this is what's happening with the diet. It's actually, if I repent, if I sacrifice enough, then I get rewarded with health and having no pain and all these things. So that's the mindset, I guess, that really need to think about when it comes to your diet, is how much repentance do you need to do? How much suffering do you need to do to now have this health that's bestowed upon you? So that was my belief. And I had that belief for quite a few years. It was only when I got this amazing comment on my blog, and I shared this in the email, is I got this comment saying, you should really look into EFT. Now, I've never heard of EFT. I had no idea what that even was. But at this point, I was running the blog. I was getting a lot of followers, and whatever people wrote in, I would be like, okay, cool, I'll try it, whatever. It was an adventure, an exploration of how to figure out how to cure myself of endometriosis, which was my goal at the time. Now, I found that the EFT was something really transformative for me. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but Emotional Freedom Technique is something really simple. It's literally tapping on points on your body, on your face mostly, and releasing emotions that you hold, or beliefs that you hold about yourself, around things that have happened to you, etc. And you essentially release these from the body. So when I say release, sometimes people find that really confusing. So what I'll share with you is kind of a story that encompasses my beliefs that I had at the time. So I had this belief that I wasn't enough. And it came about because I had a brother who died when I was very young. So I was 5 or 6 at the time. And my mom said to me, before he died, because he was very sick for about 6 months. And she said to me, you need to go into your room and you need to pray for your brother. And if you pray really, really hard, maybe he'll get better. Well, I mean, I was 6, so I didn't have no concept of anything. So I prayed and I prayed and I tried so hard, to pray as hard as I believed I could. And then he died. And he died a few days later. So it was, really top of mind, really surface level. And I remember feeling guilt. I remember feeling shame that I hadn't done enough. I hadn't prayed hard enough for him. And of course, my mother changed after that. She'd just lost her son. So I believe she resented me, and it was my fault that this had happened. I was 6. I had obviously no concept of things, but I carried this belief with me for many, many years. Subconsciously, I didn't recognize that I was doing this. And it was only once I'd done the EFT that all this stuff came up, and my beliefs around death and fear of death. Like, I had a huge fear of death, because I did actually die. That's another story. But I essentially had a lot of fear around death and a lot of guilt around that experience. And because I believed that I essentially didn't try hard enough, I felt like I had to pay penance. And so I always did more for my mom. Whenever she wanted something, I was there, and I just gave and gave and gave. And this carried through into other things as well, in terms of jobs. I always used to do more. I always had this belief that I wasn't enough, and I hadn't done enough to save him. And so that was my penance. Now, you can imagine how exhausting that is, to never think that what you've done is enough, and to constantly be pushing yourself and having this belief that I wasn't enough. And so much tied into our value and who we are as a person. It was really quite eye-opening to have that experience with the EFT, because that's what released it. And I did work with someone, so it wasn't something I discovered on my own. I did work with a practitioner who guided me through that experience. And if anyone would like to try that, let me know, because I can put you in touch with her. She's phenomenal. But it was really a huge shift in my whole journey. That is why I don't just profess diet and exercise, which is what most people who try and educate you about how to go naturally with endometriosis do. It's all about diet and exercise. But here's the thing: if you have those emotional things in your mind, if you believe that you're not enough, or you believe, I don't know, whatever stuff you believe, and it's subconscious particularly, you will be pushing yourself mentally, physically harder all the time. And your anxiety levels are going to be high. You're going to have high stress because you have these beliefs. Like, imagine if you went to work and you were like, yep, I'm just going to do what I need to do, and I can only do so much in a day, and whatever's done is done. And you walked away and you were fine with that. Your stress levels wouldn't be so high. The reason our stress levels get so high is because we are in this mindset of, I'm not enough. I need to perform harder. I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to do more. And so we take on more because we're trying to prove to the boss or prove ourselves that we're worthy. And so that is a level of anxiety and stress that we have created through our thinking. There are lots of people who have very high pressure jobs that don't get that stressed. So we have to always question, what is it about our thinking? What is it about our mindset that's different? And that's where EFT can really, really support you. So freeing some of those emotions from the body, working through when you feel anxious, what's going on there? When you feel overwhelmed, what's going on there? Actually diving a little bit deeper. And a lot of the time when I work with women, this is the area they don't want to confront. I know it's not fun. It's not fun to look at this stuff, but this is really what shifts things, because when you look at endometriosis, inflammation, and I strongly believe there's an autoimmune component going on here, whether it's an autoimmune condition or not, there is an autoimmune component for sure. What does autoimmune mean? It means the body is attacking its own cells. Why? What is the connection that you guys can see here? There is a connection. There is an aspect of yourself that you don't like. There is an aspect of being a woman that you don't like. There is an aspect of those womanly bits that you possibly don't like. Maybe there was a bad experience that happened to you when you were younger. Who knows what that thing is, but there is an aspect there of why is the body attacking itself. And that is the mindset shift that I feel is super, super powerful. And when we can free that, when we can release that, so much of that can shift. So have a think about that. Feel free to share if you want to. I mean, it's a big topic and it's a bit scary, and a lot of us don't want to go there. We don't want to confront that. We want to just focus on diet and exercise because that's easy by comparison. I can get all the control I need with my diet. Yeah. But it's not a healthy way to live. And ultimately, we also want to be happy, healthy individuals that don't have stress, that can be calm, that can take the world with joy and see the world with joy. And it's really hard to do when you're in this constant state of anxiety and worry. So anyone want to share that? I would love to hear from you guys. Any thoughts on that? Okay. Right. So where was I? Okay. So I did do a lot of EFT. I did a lot of emotional healing. And that was really when I noticed significant shifts in my pain. Actually, the pain went away. I found that I was able to have pain-free periods for the first time ever. And I knew I was on the right track. So much of the imbalances that are part of having endometriosis relate back to inflammation. So even though we focus on hormones, hormones are actually triggered by the inflammation itself. So the mast cells that are part of that inflammatory response trigger higher estrogen. And then elevated estrogen goes back looping back to those mast cells being released. So it's this kind of perpetual loop. So by lowering inflammation, we actually stop the hormone imbalance as the secondary symptom, because ultimately it's a symptom, it's not the trigger. So inflammation, when we look at it, is sort of this almost like a heightened sense of stress, So when we can lower that response, we lower inflammation. When we lower inflammation, we lower all the triggers of ultimately what is happening with endometriosis. So I don't know how many of these you've watched, so I don't know how much your knowledge is in terms of inflammation, but ultimately inflammation is a group term encompassing pain, encompassing bloating, encompassing redness. That is what inflammation is. And ultimately that is what's out of sync with endometriosis. And when we can regulate inflammation, all that endometriosis, essentially, it's not triggered anymore. You're not going to have this overreaction towards those essentially dispersed cells in the wrong place. The body's just going to go, well, they're not an issue. I'm just going to clean that up, because it's no longer seeing that as a threat. It's no longer overreacting towards them. So I hope that makes sense. As I mentioned, I am creating a free first, this is like an introductory course to understand endometriosis a little bit better. If you would like to have access to that, then write to me and I will give you access to that. It's a completely free course. It is going to be the most fun course ever because I'm making it really interactive. So you get to click on the screen and things happen. It's quite fun. Okay, so carrying on with my story. So I then went down kind of this whole path of working out what I felt were triggers with endometriosis, and in terms of that autoimmune component, like why is there this overreaction? Why is there this aspect of the body being triggered? And I found this really cool study basically that said 90% of women have dispersed cells in the abdomen. So pretty much all women have these dispersed cells. but only 40% of women develop endometriosis. So what is the trigger there? What is happening there? And one of the other biggest studies I found was on the connection with dioxin and endometriosis. So they basically took rhesus monkeys and they put dioxin into these monkeys, and these monkeys developed endometriosis. So obviously that's not conclusive, but it's fairly interesting that you would have such an instant response. Now, dioxin is what's typically found in Roundup, which is sprayed on most crops, and interestingly, wheat crops. So is it the gluten or is it actually the dioxin? Like then there's glyphosate, there's all sorts of things that are being sprayed on those foods. But it got me down this path of, okay, there is obviously a toxin component here. There's obviously parasites that also form. Now, when you have heightened anxiety, heightened stress, the chance of your body having some kind of parasite or some kind of bacterial imbalance is higher because the defense system is lowered. Your immune system is lowered. It's not as powerful. Like your army is just, they're not as strong because you're in this state of anxiety and stress. And obviously, there's also a lot of this inflammation going on. So I looked really deeply into how do we really support the body to detoxify? And this is a big topic. Like there's a lot to this, but to give you sort of the nuts and bolts of it, it's looking at your liver health. How can you better support your liver health? It's looking at what toxins are currently in your body and making sure that you eliminate that. Because if there is a bacterial overgrowth, if there is a parasite in your body, if there's candida, if there's whatever, that's sucking up your nutrients. That's taking away from your replenishment that you need and giving it to that other thing. And it's draining your body of energy. So cleanse. So we've got reach, technique, replenish, exercise, affirm. Cleanse is all about that, is all about how do we really cleanse out the body? How do we support the body, in terms of getting rid of those parasites, cleaning out whatever imbalances are going on? And that was something that I focused on next. And I did a lot of things, some very scary things, because I, of course, wanted to try everything. So I did a colonic, I did a liver flush, which I don't recommend. It was very hard. And just did a lot of cleansing, did a lot of things to clean out the gut, did a lot of things to rectify a lot of the imbalances that unfortunately were caused by so many years of those hormone treatments. So the gut was really out of balance, and there was a lot of, bacterial overgrowths, etc. So that was essentially the final step, and it's through all of these, and Reach has got a last step, which is H, which is help and support, and having that around you, having a support space where you can share openly, where you can have support in choosing this natural path is crucial. It is really hard to do this on your own. It's really, really hard to do this on your own. You're going to have people around you, family, friends, who don't get it. You're going to have people questioning, why are you doing it this way? Why don't you go down the conventional path? Why don't you just do what the surgeon tells you? You're going to be confronted with feeling really embarrassed when you go into social environments where people are like, what do you mean you don't eat gluten? And how to actually get through that, how to, talk to people without feeling weird or shameful about your choice, because otherwise it takes such strength. And generally when you're not well, you don't have a lot of that. You're already feeling really depleted in your energy levels. So the last thing you want is that anxiety. And so I do feel that having a support space that's positive is super important. there are so many support spaces now on social networks, but they're not generally positive, they're just a grumble session about how tough their endo is. And yes, of course that helps, but to a point, like we need to find ways to move forward and find tools that actually support our healing. And so, yeah, so that is something that I'm looking at creating is a more powerful support space for everyone, because yeah, it's not an easy journey, and I didn't have a huge amount of support, especially when I started. This whole natural stuff wasn't around. Now you go to the supermarket, there's every type of milk you could possibly imagine, but when I was doing it, there wasn't. So I just avoided dairy and had nothing else. So I was making my own, or I was just using something like tea or something else in my as my liquid. So yeah, but that was pretty much everything in my journey. I've got a little bit over time today, so thank you for being here. And if you want to share your thoughts, your questions, if you want to share anything, feel free to use the comments now. I'll just finish my tea and wait for you to share any thoughts or questions. Anyone want to ask me anything about any part of my journey, anything that you feel is maybe inhibiting you in some way within your journey? Is there parts of the diet that you're confused about? Is there aspects of moving your body that you're not sure how to move your body, or you're not sure what parts are more important? Is there aspects of the emotional picture that we talked about today that you feel maybe a bit confronting, or you're not sure why you should do it? Anything, feel free to ask. Also, if anyone would like any of the resources I've mentioned, or any access to anything, please also write in. Our email is support@endoempower.com. Feel free to reach out to me there as well if there's anything you want to ask me. I'm here for you, and know that I'm here for you. I want to make your journey way better than mine, because mine was shit. Karen, feel free to ask your question. And anyone else who wants to ask a question, now's your chance. Ask away. Karen, is your question coming? I'm not sure how delayed this is. Right. So we do have, like I said, we do have a new program coming out, and it's completely free. It's all about understanding endometriosis. It's called Dig In. So it's going to be coming out hopefully by early March. We're working towards it. But it essentially explains the 3 key components of endometriosis and how they influence endometriosis. So we've got inflammation, hormone imbalance, and the autoimmune or the immune system, and how that all correlates. Okay. Right. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for being here. Okay, Karen's story. So I have less pain, almost no pain at all, with help from food and mental, but my endometriosis spread more. Okay, so if this is the case, I would first, I guess I want to know how you know that, if they have done surgery to determine that, or how did you figure that out? Because that's kind of a interesting one. My question would be, what are you eating in terms of supporting your body to stop the spread? So there are specific foods that actually address endometriosis spreading and actually address that specific reaction. So the immune system has something called NK cells that their job is to go around looking for rogue cells. And the rogue cells are kind of what they test mostly for cancer cells. So that's typically what a lot of the studies have focused on, cancer cells. But when you think about what endometriosis is, it's essentially the same thing. So if we can get those same NK cells elevated and boosted up within the immune system, they can go around and they can essentially, like a Pac-Man, go and eat away all of those endometriosis cells. When you say ultrasound, it sounds to me like it's possibly more adhesions that have spread versus endometriosis itself. It's very difficult to see endometriosis on an ultrasound. It could be that you've got cysts. I'm not sure what's happening there, Karen, so it's quite hard for me to kind of guide you on that. There is, however, lots you can do in terms of reducing endometriosis spreading in terms of adhesions. The biggest one that I can recommend just straight off the bat is called Serrapeptase. So Serrapeptase is it's a supplement, and it basically, it's what silkworms use to get out of their cocoon. It's the enzyme that they use to get out of their cocoon. Incredible benefits for women with endo. I've been recommending this supplement for years. So I think since 2013. I was having a look at my YouTube videos the other day. 2013, I recommended Serrapeptase. And there's another product called Vitalsym, which has serrapeptase, but also supports the digestive system at the same time. So highly, highly recommend those for you to try. But yeah, it's a big conversation in terms of the spread. What else can I recommend? Oh, curcumin. If you didn't watch my other video, yeah, so I'll pop it in the comments for you. So serrapeptase, there is a video on my channel on both of these. So if you look up those two on my channel, my YouTube channel, they're on there, and also the blog. So if you want to read more about them and where to buy them, because if you buy them through me, then I get a bit of a commission, which is great if you can do that. And what was I saying? Oh, curcumin. So curcumin is on, I did mention this on one of my other Tea with Mel series. So if you haven't checked that out, go back and watch that. I think it was last week that I mentioned that one. Curcumin, there's a study specifically showing that curcumin causes something called apoptosis, which is essentially means cell death, which sounds really horrendous, but it causes the endometriosis cells to actually die, which is, yippee, what we want. So definitely want to have some curcumin. There are lots and lots of things that can achieve this result. So please don't feel that you're stuck with anything. There are huge amounts of herbs. There are huge amounts of spices, specifically looking into spices, because they have incredible healing powers. There is a reason why people traveled a long way to India, to, you know, China, to these other parts of the world to get these spices. There's a reason. They are hugely powerful for healing the body, hugely powerful for fighting off parasites and bacteria and imbalances, hugely powerful at correcting the triggers of inflammation. So yeah, really look into those. I am looking at creating some kind of program specifically for addressing the spread. So I'll let you know, Karen, if you're on my list, I'll let you know when that's out. It probably won't be for a little while because we're focusing on just getting this new course out, and then we're going to do a food specific program that we're launching in March probably. So yeah, let me know though if you'd be keen on that. There is so much you can do in terms of really healing this. And I guess that was the kind of the whole point of this video, is that there is hope and there is a way forward, and there is a way that the body can heal. The body knows how to heal. It wants to heal. I want to share a story of a lady who I worked with, and she was super, super into all of this, and she implemented a lot of things. Her name was Larissa, and she had stage 4 endometriosis. It had spread everywhere. And she had to have surgery, a secondary surgery for a different reason, but she had to have secondary surgery. And so while they were there, they had a look at her endometriosis. And it was, I can't remember the time frame now, but she literally had the surgeon after the second surgery said to her, "This does not look like the same woman," because she had barely any endometriosis left after doing all the treatments. So it is definitely possible to heal this. It is definitely possible to reduce the endometriosis. And I know we don't believe in natural stuff. I don't know why. It's just become so, oh, what's diet going to do? What's, but these are things that the body knows how to heal. And oftentimes we're just getting in the way. And it's about really supporting the body, providing for the body, and it does the work. So it's not about take this equals this. It's creating an environment for healing. And so I will be sharing all of these stories with you guys very, very soon, because they're so powerful and so important. And, there is so much amazing stuff that can happen. And I really want to give you that hope that it's possible. So cool. All right. I've gone way over today. Let's have it. Oh, there's one more comment come in. Steph, how do I treat painful bowel movements? So constipation, it really is very easy to treat with a good diet. So if you really look into increasing natural fibers, so not fiber that they sell you, so not don't go buy Metamucil or whatever brands are, but really looking at your diet. What are you eating to support your body in terms of that? If your bowels are painful, it's really just supporting that peristalsis of the bowel so that it can move through. Are you eating consciously? So if you missed my video last week on diet and my principles of diet, I really recommend you watch that, Steph. I'm not sure if you watched that one. But being really present when you eat is probably the first thing. And then just being mindful of what you're eating. Constipation often can be alleviated by cutting out gluten. It's a huge, huge one. And a lot of the pain associated with endometriosis is often got to do with the gut. And gluten is a big trigger for inflammation. So that would probably be one I'd check out. Yeah, it's a big question. So yeah, but feel free to check out the one on diet that I did last week. That should help you. And yeah, my course on food would definitely help you, because we're focusing on what are the nourishing foods, what are the foods that heal, what are the foods that give you that empowerment factor. It's really empowering the body to do the healing. And so we've sourced all these amazing things and amazing foods that can support your body to do that. So cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here and for participating. I really appreciate the comments. Makes it so much more enjoyable when you share, because otherwise I feel like I'm talking to myself. So if you have other questions, if you have other things that you would like me to talk more about, if you want me to do a Tea with Mel all about gut health, let me know. I can do any topics on endo, any topics around natural health. I'm a qualified naturopath now, so I can really talk about anything that you want. So feel free to let me know, reach out, support@endoempowered.com, and look forward to hearing from you. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.